Have you ever locked eyes with someone and felt like time stopped, as if you weren't meeting them for the first time, but remembering them from somewhere deeper, maybe even from another life? That eerie sense of familiarity, the magnetic pull that defies logic, the overwhelming certainty that this person was meant to be in your story. Maybe you felt it in the way they smiled, the way they spoke your name, or simply how they occupied space near you, as if your soul had already written their presence into its blueprint. That feeling, that unmistakable, electrifying connection, it's beautiful, isn't it? But also terrifying, because sometimes, despite all that intensity, the story doesn't unfold the way you imagined. Sometimes, it ends before it even begins. The energy is there, the emotions are real, but the connection, unreciprocated, unfulfilled, unexplained, and it leaves you wondering, how can something that felt so meant to be just slip away like it was never real? How can something so strong, so undeniable, not be mutual? But what if I told you it wasn't love at all? Not in the way you think. What if what you felt wasn't destiny, but illusion? Not a lie, but a reflection, a mirage, a deep psychological phenomenon that neither you nor he recognized, but both of you were completely engulfed by? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who reshaped how we understand the unconscious mind, uncovered something that few people are ever taught yet. It impacts nearly every relationship you've had. A psychological loop, a trap, one that causes us to fall in love, not with others, but with the parts of ourselves we've disowned and projected onto them. This isn't just abstract theory. This is a pattern that's likely repeated in your own love life without you even noticing. You see, what if the reason he didn't choose you wasn't because you weren't enough, but because the version of you he fell for never really existed? And even more unsettling, what if the version of him you loved was also never truly real? It sounds harsh, but it might be the most liberating truth you'll ever hear. Let's go back for a moment. Remember that connection, that deep, soul-level pull, that feeling that he saw you, maybe more than anyone else ever had. If you're honest, wasn't part of what made it so powerful the fact that it felt inevitable? As if you didn't choose to feel it, it simply happened to you? Here's the twist. What if that very inevitability was the first red flag? You weren't being drawn toward him randomly. There was a force beneath the surface, a psychological magnet activated in your unconscious, the same force that drove him to chase you intensely at first, only to disappear when he finally had you. This isn't a story about heartbreak. This is a story about awakening. Jung discovered that inside every man exists a hidden archetypian inner feminine he called the Anima. It's not a metaphor. It's a powerful psychological structure formed from every experience he's had with women, his mother, sisters, lovers, fantasies, wounds. And it's this anima that he projects onto the women he becomes obsessed with, not because of who they are, but because of what they awaken in him unconsciously. When a woman is emotionally distant, mysterious, or unattainable, something astonishing happens in his psyche. She becomes a blank screen onto which his anima can be projected, and the less he knows about her, the stronger the projection becomes. He fills in the blanks with idealized images. She becomes everything he's ever longed for but never truly known. And so he chases, but not you. The idea of you, the version of you that matches the template in his unconscious, the ghost of a woman he's never met, but always searched for. And when you finally open up, when you finally return the affection, the illusion begins to crack. The fantasy meets reality, and reality can never match fantasy. This is why it hurts so much. This is why so many women feel like they were everything he wanted, until they gave in. Then he pulls away, grows cold, Ava disappears, It's not because you changed. It's because the fantasy could no longer be maintained. And here's the second layer of the illusion. Because it doesn't just happen to him. It happens to you too. The moment you felt that deep connection, that inexplicable draw, your unconscious was working too. You weren't just falling for him. You were responding to a projection of your own. Your animus, your inner masculine. The traits you've disowned in yourself that you now see in him: strength, protection, purpose, presence. This is not about blaming. This is about reclaiming. Because here's the truth. Few dare to say out loud, you don't need to change yourself to be loved. You don't need to play games or chase validation. What you need, what we all need, is awareness. Awareness of the unconscious forces shaping your desire. Awareness of the patterns that feel like fate, but are actually fragments of your psyche looking for wholeness in another. The more you understand this, the less you'll feel broken when someone pulls away. The less you'll internalize rejection. The more power you'll feel when navigating attraction, not because you're manipulating it, but because you're no longer controlled by it. So I ask you now, was he truly your soulmate? Or was he a mirror? Was that connection real? Or was it a reflection of something you needed to see in yourself? This isn't an ending. It's the beginning of clarity. Because when you see the illusion, it starts to lose its power. When you bring awareness to projection, you gain back the freedom to choose a note from desperation, but from presence. Not to complete yourself, but to meet another soul eye to eye. And that is where real love begins. If you've ever experienced a connection so deep, it shook your entire being only to watch it vanish, without explanation, leave a single dot in the comments. Just one. That's all it takes. You are not alone in this. Together, we're going to decode the truth. You thought he loved you. The way he looked at you like you were the missing piece to his entire life. The way he said things like, "I've never met anyone like you." Or, "You make me feel more like myself than I've ever felt." It wasn't just flattering. It was profound, almost spiritual. He seemed captivated, mesmerized, as if he'd found something sacred in you. And maybe, for a while, you believed it too. But then something changed. He pulled away, slowly at first. He stopped texting as often. The warmth in his voice faded. The enthusiasm dulled. Until one day, it was like you were a stranger again. And you were left asking the question that haunts so many women. What happened? How can someone go from obsession to indifference so quickly? The answer lies in a concept few people understand. Yet it shapes the entire structure of romantic attraction for many men. Projection of the anima. Let's strip away the illusions. Carl Jung, the renowned psychologist, discovered that every man carries within him a deeply embedded feminine archetype, the anima. It is not a fantasy or a conscious idea, but a psychological structure formed from all the images, experiences, feelings, and unconscious desires he has related to women throughout his life. This anima is not you. It's not any real woman. It is a composite constructed from memory, idealization, emotional longing, and even wounds. So what happens when a man meets a woman who is mysterious, emotionally distant, or hard to define? He projects his anima onto her. This is not love in the real sense. It is projection. He is not falling for who you truly are. He is falling for the parts of his psyche he has not yet acknowledged, the vulnerable, intuitive, emotional aspects he has disconnected from. You became a screen, a canvas, a mirror. That's why he said things like, "You make me feel like myself." Of course you did. Because in his unconscious mind, you weren't you. You were the reflection of something deep inside him that he had never met until now. And here's the devastating twist. He never actually saw you. He saw her, his anima, the feminine energy he was cut off from, the archetype that lives within his unconscious, powerful, idealized, elusive. And because this projection is rooted in deep psychological need, it creates a surge of attraction that is often described as instant chemistry or love at first sight. But it's not love, it's dopamine, it's fantasy, it's projection, and like all illusions, it eventually collapses. Let's look at the signs that you were never really loved, just projected onto excessive idealization. He said you were different from every other woman. He placed you on a pedestal, not because of your actual qualities, but because of how little he knew about you. The less he understood, the more space there was for projection. This is why the beginning felt magical. Not because it was real, but because you were still a blank slate. Intensity from the beginning. He didn't get to know you gradually. He dove in head first. He confessed deep feelings within days or weeks. He made grand gestures. This isn't the behavior of a man who's connecting to reality. It's the behavior of someone overwhelmed by unconscious forces. It's emotional intoxication. Not love. Disappearance after reciprocation. The moment you let down your guard. When you finally returned, the affection, everything shifted. He pulled away. The warmth vanished. Why? Because the real you could no longer match the fantasy he had built. The projection hit a wall. Your humanity, your imperfections, your boundaries. And he didn't know how to love that, because he never prepared himself to love a real person. Only a symbol. This is where the heartbreak begins. You start doubting yourself. You wonder what you did wrong. You revisit every conversation, every text, looking for the moment things changed. But the painful truth is it was never about you to begin with. You were never fully seen. You were never truly chosen. You were used, unknowingly, as a psychological mirror. And when the image no longer reflected what he needed to see, he walked away. This is the secret. No dating advice tells you the most intense connections are often the most dangerous, because they feel like destiny. But they are frequently projections in disguise. So what do you do with this knowledge? You stop blaming yourself. You stop chasing closure from someone who never saw you clearly. And most importantly, you stop internalizing rejection that was never about your worth. Because here's the most important truth of all. When you become aware of projection, it loses its grip on you. When you can recognize the signs, the idealization, the speed, the sudden distance, you begin to reclaim your power. You can say, this isn't about me. This is about him and what he's looking for in himself. That doesn't make the pain disappear, but it does something even more valuable. It restores your clarity. You deserve to be loved not as a fantasy, not as an ideal, but as a real, complex, imperfect human being. And the man who is capable of that kind of love, he doesn't rush. He doesn't idealize. He doesn't finish. It says you, fully. If you've ever experienced a man disappearing just when you started to love him back, drop the words, "I understand," in the comments. It's not your fault. It never was. What you went through wasn't rejection. It was a projection. And now, you're finally free to see it. Here's the truth. No one dares to tell you. The overwhelming obsession he had for you, the longing, the intensity, the way he clung to you like you were the only air he could breathe, and none of it was actually about you. It was about his mother. That may sound dramatic, maybe even offensive. But if you really want to understand why some men chase you with fire in their eyes and then vanish the moment you return that affection, you need to go back not to the start of your relationship, but to the start of his emotional blueprint, to his childhood. Carl Jung taught that our earliest emotional patterns don't disappear as we age, they deepen. They burrow into the unconscious, becoming the invisible architecture of how we love, how we suffer, and how we attach. And one of the most powerful, yet least recognized, forces in a man's romantic behavior is the wound of maternal disconnection. Here's how it works. As a child, every boy begins life in deep emotional fusion with his mother. She is his source of life, nourishment, safety, and warmth. But inevitably, there comes a moment when that connection is disrupted. Sometimes it happens gently, sometimes violently. Sometimes the mother was emotionally unavailable, distracted, absent, or even overbearing. Either way, the result is the same: a wound forms. The boy learns, consciously or not, that the pure, unconditional love he once felt is no longer accessible, that what he longs for cannot be fully reached. And from that moment on, a part of his psyche begins to ache, not just for a woman, but for the woman he never fully had, the one who made him feel safe, all whole, enough. That wound never fully disappears. So what happens when he meets you, and you're a little distant, a little mysterious, emotionally unavailable, but just present enough to keep the possibility alive? He doesn't just feel attraction, he feels familiarity. You awaken something ancient inside him, not desire, but yearning. Not love, but lack. You mirror the exact emotional configuration that shaped his childhood, a woman he desperately wants, but can't fully reach. That's why your indifference drives him wild. When you pull away, his abandonment wound reactivates, but he doesn't know that's what it is. All he knows is that he needs you, that he must win you over, that if he can finally get your love, something inside him will feel whole again. But he's not consciously thinking, "She reminds me of my mother." The process is entirely unconscious. And here's the devastating irony. When you finally do open up, when you let down your guard and offer him the love he so desperately chased, something inside him breaks, but not in the way you expect. The moment you become available, the emotional dynamic changes. He no longer feels the chase. The emotional tension that mirrored his childhood wound disappears. And with it goes the intense dopamine rush his psyche was addicted to. You didn't do anything wrong. You gave him what he said he wanted. But what he actually needed on an unconscious level was not resolution, but repetition. His nervous system had been trained to find familiarity in the pain of longing, not in the safety of being loved. So now that you're present, real, human, he loses interest. The enchantment fades. The obsession dissolves. And in many cases, he leaves. Not because you failed him, but because he was never trying to love you. He was trying to heal a wound through you. A wound that can't be healed through anyone else. This is the hidden dynamic at play in so many relationships. The illusion of love built on the scaffolding of unprocessed childhood pain. It's why so many women find themselves feeling like therapists, saviors, or even mothers in their relationships. Because on some unconscious level, they are stepping into that role. Have you ever felt like you were raising a child trapped in the body of a man? Like all the emotional labor fell on you? That you were soothing wounds you didn't cause? It wasn't your imagination. That was the boy inside him, reaching for the mother he never fully had. And unless he's done the inner work to recognize and repair that pattern, he will unconsciously recreate it with every woman he meets, especially those who, like you, trigger the same emotional conditions that shaped his past. This is why the chase feels more intoxicating than the relationship, why he is euphoric during the pursuit, but detached once he has you. Because the psychological high doesn't come from love, it comes from the attempt to resolve a trauma through repetition, and no one can maintain that illusion forever. So what do you do with this? First, you stop internalizing his withdrawal as your fault. It was never about your value. It was about his unhealed history. Second, you begin to recognize the signs of this dynamic early. The speed of his affection, the emotional highs that feel too good to be true, the way he seems addicted to your distance, but disinterested in your presence. And finally, you ask yourself the hardest question of all: am I being loved? Or am I being used as a stage for someone else's healing? Because until that pattern is broken, the story will repeat over and over again. If you've ever felt like you were parenting someone who should have been your partner, if you've ever sensed you were a stand-in for someone else's emotional past, I invite you to share your truth. Comment below with the words, "I've felt it." Maybe you're not the first woman to be pulled into this cycle, but you can be the first in your story to step out of it. Real love doesn't begin in the arms of another. It begins in the moment you stop searching for someone to complete you. Carl Jung called this process individuation, a journey of psychological integration where you reclaim all the disowned parts of yourself. It's not a destination, but a becoming, a return to wholeness. And until this journey begins, we are all vulnerable to one of the most seductive illusions of the human experience, mistaking unconscious projection for love. We've spent the last chapters exploring how men often fall in love, not with a woman, but with their Anima, internal feminine, they have lost touch with. But now comes the twist that few expect, and even fewer are ready to accept. You do it too. Yes, you. Just as men project their ideal feminine image onto women, women project their internal masculinity, animusanto men. And when you meet a man who appears strong, decisive, charismatic, emotionally present, protective, or even mysterious, it may not be that he is all those things. It may be that those are the qualities you have rejected, suppressed, or failed to integrate within yourself. And so he feels like fate. He feels like home. He feels like the missing piece. But here's the truth. He completes me is not love. It's projection. It's your unconscious speaking through longing. That intense pull, that feeling that you were meant to meet, that might not be destiny. It might be your inner masculine, your capacity for direction, action, protection, strength rising to the surface, seeking recognition. And because you haven't yet made it fully yours, your psyche casts it onto someone else. And the tragedy is, just like with men, once the fantasy fades, the reality feels disappointing, because no one can embody your inner masculine for you, just as no one can be your salvation. So how do we break this cycle? First, pause. The next time you meet someone who seems too perfect, too aligned with your deepest dreams, ask yourself, am I falling for this persona, for the version of myself I've hidden from view? Second, hold the projection gently in your hands. Don't judge it. Don't deny it. Look at it as a message. What is it revealing about you? What qualities do you admire in them that may already be living quietly inside you, waiting for permission to exist? Maybe his emotional presence reminds you that you've neglected your own inner calm. Maybe his strength reflects the power you've learned to suppress. Maybe his assertiveness echoes the voice inside you that longs to be heard. The third step is the most powerful. Reintegrate. Reclaim those qualities. Bring them home. Stop outsourcing your worth to external relationships. Stop needing someone else to be the container for your unlived potential. You can be soft and strong. You can be intuitive and clear. You can be nurturing and assertive. You don't need a man to give you your direction, your purpose, your sense of being chosen. When you cultivate these qualities within yourself, something extraordinary happens. You stop seeking relationships that feel like rescue missions. You start choosing ones that feel like resonance. Love stops being a fantasy. It becomes a choice, not born from lack, but from abundance, from truth, from presence, because real love isn't made from projection. It's built in the space where two people see each other without illusion, where there is no pedestal, no performance, no myth, just the raw, beautiful, terrifying honesty of two complete human beings, meeting as they are. And that kind of love, it doesn't burn fast and fade. It grows, it deepens, it challenges, it heals, but you must come to it whole. This is what Jung meant by the sacred marriage, the conjunction, not the union of two people, but the inner union of opposites, the masculine and feminine in you, the lover and the beloved, the seeker and the one who has already arrived. Once that inner marriage begins, everything changes. You stop chasing the ghost of love. You stop mistaking emotional chaos for passion. You stop running toward people who awaken your wounds and calling it fate. And you begin choosing from clarity, from groundedness, from self-recognition. The relationships you build from that place may look quieter at first, less dramatique, less addictive, but they will carry a different kind of intensity, the intensity of truth, of presence, of genuine connection. So ask yourself now, honestly, who have you been projecting onto? Who did you once believe was the only one who could complete you? And what if everything you saw in them was simply a mirror of the parts of you waiting to be loved back into life? You don't need someone else to prove that you are lovable, powerful, safe, or worthy. You only need to remember what has always lived within you, because love doesn't arrive when you are broken and needing to be fixed. It arrives when you are whole and ready to be met. If you're ready to stop chasing love as a reflection of what you lack and start building it from the truth of who you are, comment below with one word: awakened. End of W. Let it be your declaration. And if you know someone who's stuck in a loop of romantic pain, send this to them. You may not just be sharing a video. You might be saving them years of heartbreak, years of chasing ghosts. Love is not found in fantasy. It's created in reality. And the moment you return to yourself, love will meet you there.